So it's been 1 month since I first got my hands on the Motorola RAZR 2023, which at the time of making this video is the most affordable, foldable, flippable smartphone at just $500. In this video, I want to share with you some of the new experiences I've had with this new RAZR after a month of use and share some insight on whether or not it is a worthy consideration, since there are some compromises with this cheaper clamshell, and there's other compelling options to choose from right now, like Motorola's Plus version of this RAZR with more features, and of course competitors like my Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 5, which will serve as a point of reference in this video to show what is really differentiating each of these foldables. So let's just get started with pricing, since for seemingly the first time we have a bit of pricing tier going on with foldables. Of course, at the top end we have the Samsung Flip 5, which nearly 5 months after its release, it can be found for around $850 now. Then we have the RAZR Plus, which stacks up pretty well to my Flip 5. However, there are a couple core differences I'll show later on in the video, bringing this phone to its current $700 price. And then taking a look at the star of the show here, we have the RAZR Non-Plus at just $500, which that was the most exciting aspect of this phone for me and the primary reason I went out and bought it in the first place. And I was pleasantly surprised that this phone packs a ton of what's made foldable phones so enjoyable for me over the past few years now. So that sets the stage for this 2023 RAZR, which we have a 6.9-inch display with a 1080p resolution alongside a 144 Hz refresh rate. The AMOLED screen is very saturated and the colors really pop on this phone, and it has 1400 nits of brightness, so I've never had a single issue seeing it out in direct sunlight when out and about with this phone. And the crease in the middle is pretty minimal, so you don't really even feel it or come into contact with it that much in everyday use, since this is a very tall phone given its near 7-inch screen size. So when scrolling, it is out of the way compared to my Flip 5, which is a shorter phone at 6.7 inches, so I am feeling that crease a lot more often in comparison for those who care. And then on the outside, we have a small but still somewhat functional 1.5-inch outer display, which also gets pretty bright at 1000 nits. And in my first month of use, this has actually been a great little screen for the smaller things, like quickly checking the time and date and how much battery I have left, in addition to seeing what notifications I have with an easy to use interface, which is appreciated when the screen is this small. And you are able to read some things straight off of this screen, which is nice, in addition to setting a timer, checking the weather, or quickly capturing a voice memo. So of course this can be seen as a big compromise compared to the RAZR Plus and Flip 5, but in this instance the cost savings are arguably worth it, and there's still something to be said about having your distracting display closed up and away in the times that you don't need it. But when you do need it, it's also a great performer with a flagship processor from a little while back, the Snapdragon 7 Gen 1 chipset, which makes for an excellent everyday user experience as far as navigating through this phone and multitasking and switching between apps. And the battery life can actually be pretty good on this phone with lighter use, with a reasonably sized 4200 milliamp hour battery. More on the battery later. Now, while I'm glad the specs pair pretty well with the price point here, I am even more excited in the fact that this foldable is very much refined and cleaned up in the physical opening and closing mechanics of it, which is very important to me when you are opening and closing your phone up to 50 times a day for various things in various places. So the ability to open this phone easily with one hand is very much appreciated, and it's part of what makes these foldable phones so much fun to use. So I love that this phone can be comfortably used in one hand, and there's not a whole lot of creaks or clicks in the folding mechanism compared to previous RAZRs I've used and reviewed. So this is what it sounds like. And there's also this leather-like finish on this sage green color of the RAZR I have, which provides a ton of peace of mind for me with this phone, since it has a lot more grip in the hand, which helps since these clamshell phones are often in the palm of my hand since they are so easy to carry around. But also whenever I'm sitting the phone on my lap or putting it anywhere really, I don't have to worry about my phone sliding away like I often experience on my RAZR Plus and Flip 5, with much smoother finishes, which can make these a little less wieldy in the hand, or they can have a bit of a mind of their own. But overall, as far as the physical form factor goes, this is quite similar to my findings on the RAZR Plus I've been using for a few months now, so overall it goes without saying this is a very well-built phone and achieves that enjoyable one-handed experience for me personally, with one minor exception of being a bit difficult to close with one finger, as it does have a bit of resistance once fully opened up, and it does cause for just a bit more friction and lack of fluidity, which for a point of comparison, my Flip 5 closes much easier with way less friction action from my finger. And then when trying to get some nice looking footage for you guys, when I tried to close it with one hand with just my finger, I nearly dropped the phone in the water. So in my opinion, this is one of those little differences that may not matter to the masses, but it is one of those small physical compromises made when looking at these foldables on the price tier and what each offers for more or less money. Which, something else making this more affordable is only having a water repellent coating or splash resistance on the Razr and Razr Plus, whereas my Flip 5 has IPX8 water resistance rating, which does provide a lot more peace of mind for me personally, as you can probably understand from the clip I just showed. But at least the splash resistance should help with when you get caught in the rain with this phone, and I also don't have to worry as much about cleaning the phone off with water like I did when I dropped it in the mud when preparing for this video. It has aluminum sides, so it should hold up well over time, and the hinge is stainless steel and also feels very solid. Now, what also has been very solid for me with this phone in my first month of use is the average everyday user experience. Of course, the form factor is quite good, as I just elaborated on, but I found this Razr to be genuinely useful for me in my everyday life, aside from all the specs and comparisons, with features like the chop flashlight. Since this phone is often in my hand thanks to its form factor, I found myself using the flashlight feature countless times a day. It's surprisingly useful, and of course there's other moto actions like being able to twist the phone to open up the camera, and you can quickly take selfies with the outer display and use the primary cameras, which we'll touch on in a minute. But these pictures do come out pretty well, even though it's hard to see everything in real time from the 1.5-inch viewfinder. But there's a lot of software benefits I've also found with this Razr as well, like all the gaming features this phone has. Even though it's a bit wider than your standard conventional smartphone, I was able to play Oldschool Runescape at 144 Hz refresh rate with no performance issues at all. And because the phone is more on the narrow side, I found it to be pretty comfortable when scrolling through social media feeds and the news. However, videos are definitely a bit more crammed, and the speakers are not amazing, but overall it's a pretty comfortable phone to use in a lot of different ways, which is the most important thing to me. And I love that this phone has wireless charging. Even though it's only 5 watts of wireless charge, it is so incredibly convenient to drop these clamshell phones on a charger and knowing it's going to connect 100% of the time. And the wired charging is also certainly sufficient for topping up quickly, being able to charge at 30 watts, and after a little charging test I got to 54% battery in 22 minutes, 80% in 37 minutes, and to full in less than an hour. And the battery life in average use is also quite good, as I was able to get 7.5 hours of screen on time in a single charge in my normal use case of YouTube, web browsing, gaming, using various social media apps, and taking a couple phone calls throughout the day. However, it's worth noting that in heavier use cases, the phone battery does suffer more than I'm personally accustomed to, with the screen time of just 3.5 hours. So be aware that the battery life can vary greatly on this phone. And closing out this 1 month review with a focus on the cameras, because this is the other area that can greatly vary on this phone and makes the value proposition of these foldables a lot more clear. Now, when looking at the photography side of things, the average photos I get out of this phone are definitely good enough for posting on socials and sharing with family and friends. We have an 8x digital zoom, which does well enough in the right conditions, and the dedicated wide angle lens is also par for the course for this type of phone. However, the video side of things is where it just gets ugly for me on this Razr and Razr Plus. Motorola has a lot of room for improvement here, with any sort of movement in any video being very choppy and frankly disorienting to watch back. If you are taking a very basic video here and there, then I think you'll get by with the 4K 30 and 1080p 60 options. But when you compare this to the smoothness of what's offered on the Flip 5's camera system, this right here is really one of the defining differences as far as what your extra money goes towards when splurging on the more expensive Samsung Flip, for example. But overall, 1 month into things so far, I'm really enjoying this Razr for the price. I'm so glad there is a foldable phone here at the end of 2023 and heading into 2024 that is readily available and actually affordable for more people to get their hands on and experience. Now, I know I didn't touch much on the benefits of the outer display that came to some of these higher priced, newer foldables this year, so be sure to check out some of my other videos to see if that may be of interest to you. But all things considered, this $500 Razr is the best bang for buck foldable phone that actually delivers an excellent experience, and if you can live with the downsides mentioned in this video, I can highly recommend it. And I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on all this down in the comments, and be sure to check out links in the description for the latest deals. Be sure to leave a like on your way out, and thanks so much for watching. Take care.